Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's well on this Friday afternoon and has had a good week. It's another game at Carrow Road for Norwich City tomorrow afternoon. West Brom, the visitors. Adam Harvey joined by Samuel Seaman to preview this one. Obviously, we want your guys' comments. So if you've got any comments and questions for us, get them down in the comment section below and we'll get round to those towards the end of the show. To start off, Sam, before we sort of delve into the team news, I just want to reflect on Bristol City the other night. It was the first real test for me that Norwich have faced this season in terms of a potential playoff sort of promotion contender. Bristol City were a very good outfit, I felt. Norwich maybe performance-wise weren't there completely, and I got the negativity a little bit through social media that some fans felt that, that Norwich sort of maybe need to start progressing and we not see those performances on the pitch. But how do you reflect on that game? And well, inevitably it was 3 points, so it was a positive result in the end.
Yeah, and I think it bodes really well for the future for Norwich, really. I mean, after the game, Nigel Pearson spoke quite well about his team. He seemed to think the performance was there. And if that's a team that going into kickoff were fourth in the Championship playing well, and Norwich can play pretty poorly by all accounts, even by Dean Smith's own assessment, and beat them 3-2, and also accommodate some mistakes from their own defence, by the way, then that probably looks like they're going to be all right in the Championship going forward. I think there were some of the same issues that we've seen before. At times, the sort of lines of defence maybe looked a little bit more separated than you'd like. We've heard Dean Smith talk about those ever important cuts of grass and how he wants his team to be closer. And I think that was potentially an issue again last night. There's also the lack of balance on that left side. To be honest, I really don't like having Sam Byram, the right footer, on the left at the same time as having sort of Todd Cantwell in a left wing position, if you like. I know he comes off that and he doesn't end up actually really playing like a winger in any sense, but it does feel quite unbalanced. Byram's wants to come inside and get involved in the middle of the pitch. Cantwell's the same. And it just leaves sort of a hole, not only attack-wise, where they're only really using sort of 2/3 of the pitch, but also defensively. I thought Sykes got around the outside of Byram far too often on Wednesday, and that's probably makes sense given that he's a right footer playing on the left. So I think that little bit of balance, which Dean Smith has spoken about, and he's somebody that really does like balance. He likes to have, I think ideally he'd have 2 left footers and 2 right footers in his back four. The form of Grant Hanley and Andrew Omovodele, as well as the injuries to left back, mean that he can't really do that at the moment. So I think once they get that balance in, perhaps they will look slightly better defensively and more dynamic and have various different options in the attack. And there are certainly different areas to improve upon. But as I said, if that's the case and they're beating teams that are doing well in the Championship, it only looks good for the future. And I asked Dean Smith that after the game and he seemed to think the same. He seemed to think that if Norwich can get better, then it only bodes well, because they're currently second in the division by 4 points. They've got a game slack, if you like, this early on in the season, and they've not even reached the levels which everyone recognises they can. So I think going forward, there are probably actually some good signs from that Bristol game, but we're now getting towards the part of the season where you want to see the team gelling and reaching that peak, and I don't think we've seen that yet.
Yeah, we spoke about sort of the influence that Grant Hanley's had this season in that defence. We got an update on him this morning, came off against Bristol City with a shoulder injury. Smith kind of said that it's one of those that's a little bit of a concern. He's going to assess him in the training session this morning, so it's going to be a bit of a late call as to whether he's going to be available. But how big a blow is that, Sam, if he is out for tomorrow? We know that Ben Gibson is a capable deputising in that position, and he's a left-footed defender as well, which Smith spoke about at his press conference this morning, sort of the ability to actually play those balls down the left, which you kind of don't get with Grant Hanley. So what do you make of that one, and who do you expect to potentially be in that position tomorrow afternoon?
I think the fact that Hanley's training probably bodes well, and that's probably good news. But that sort of injury, it would seem strange if he's had a shoulder injury that's just going to heal itself in 3 days. If it's like a leg, strain, it could have been cramp, it could have been a slightly pulled muscle. But with the shoulder, it feels like minimum, if you've got an injury there, you've probably dislocated it. So the type of injury doesn't make me feel optimistic, but the fact that he's trained today does. Obviously, I'd imagine that decision has already been made by now. And Grant Hanley's already had the opportunity to assess where he is personally, but we know what he's like as a person. He's a big, strong lad. And I think if he can possibly get out there on the pitch, especially given the form that he's in and the competition for places in that Norwich team, then he will be out there. But as you said, there are positives to Ben Gibson being back in the team, not least that balance which Dean Smith craves and holds in such high regard. You just want to see him cut out those mistakes, really. I think they can probably cope with losing the pace of Hanley to somebody who's maybe slightly less athletically able in Ben Gibson, because they've got Andrew Mbamidele, who can certainly play that role of sweeping up. He's certainly got the athleticism to do that. But he just needs to cut out those errors. I think at key points in his career under Dean Smith, he's made those mistakes. He was in the team and looked like he was going to be part of a sort of fixed back two when he made 2 errors against Manchester United, gifted goals to Cristiano Ronaldo, and then he wasn't, I don't think, back in the team properly until the end of that season. And then that Wigan game he's called upon because of Hanley's red card and again fails to grasp his chance, basically gives them a goal as well. And you need to see him cut that out. And yes, he's going to struggle because he's not had that game time. But it just comes down to concentration, I think, not making those sorts of mistakes. And the fact is Norwich aren't a totally possession-based, pass it out from the back team anymore. It's not like a deep principle of their game that they have to pass it out in all scenarios. So really, there's no excuse for anyone making those sorts of errors and putting the team under that sort of stress and taking those risks when that's not even a key tenet of how they play anymore. So I'd like to see Gibson cut out those errors. I think he can be a decent Championship defender if he does that. But yeah, obviously, I imagine most Norwich fans would still like to see Grant Hanley in the team, and the fact that he's trained today does bode well in that case.
Yeah, moving away from the defence onto the attack, I just want to touch on Teemu Pukki, and he's moved up to 5th in the all-time goal-scoring records for Norwich, 81 goals now. He's chasing Robert Fleck, who's got 84 in 4th place. Connor obviously spoke to him after the game the other night as well. There was that sort of talk about the transfer speculation in the summer, and he was quite open that he's willing to potentially look for a move. He wanted to play in the Premier League again, and I think that's understandable. But his sort of start of the season, maybe his form wasn't there. I think the lack of chances he was getting was probably quite a pertinent point to that, rather than maybe his own lack of form. So what have you made of his performances in the last couple of games? Looks like he's sort of back to his best at Championship level.
Yeah, he's exactly the striker that we recognise, really, isn't he? You look at the goals that he scored against Coventry and that second one against Bristol especially, and it's just absolute trademark Teemu Pukki. I think there is perhaps a yard of pace that might have gone since he first arrived at Norwich. I don't think the defender's getting close to catching up with him 2 or 3 years ago, but he actually needed the help of a deflection to score against Bristol that second goal. But he's a very clever player, and I'm sure he's found ways around perhaps losing that slight athleticism. And his key attribute and his most prominent attribute, and Dean Smith talks about this all the time, is his intelligence, and you're never going to lose that. So as long as he can still run and he can stay fit, he'll keep scoring goals, especially at Championship level where the defences are shifty. Let's be honest. You see a couple of the goals that they conceded, and I don't think Norwich are scoring those goals in the Premier League. And it's probably not worth throwing that forward. There's been plenty of that, and there's going to be plenty of that looking forward to whether Norwich can do it in the Premier League. The point is, in the Championship now, they need a goal scorer, and to be getting promoted, they probably need somebody scoring, somebody scoring 20 plus, or both Pukki and Sargent scoring 15 plus. And Pukki now looks like he's very capable of doing that. And alongside somebody who we wouldn't have expected to describe as a goal scorer last season, but now looks like one in Josh Sargent. I think the Norwich City attack is in very good hands. They've got 2 strikers who are full of confidence now, and that's a vitally important component when you play in that position. I think if they get a chance in the box, there's probably a good chance they score it, given that they've got those 2 in there. So it is very encouraging. Credit to Smith and to a lot of fans for saying, through the lack of service that Pukki received, that eventually he would get that service and he would be back to the player that he is. Smith absolutely kept the faith, and as we've seen with Pukki throughout his Norwich career, that's always the best option to take. You should never rule him out, and he looks like he's going to score goals once again this year, and that's obviously fantastic news for Norwich.
Yeah, David on Facebook's kind of read my mind in terms of the next question. I'll bring up his question. Thoughts on Todd Cantwell putting in the effort and not much end product? I made a few notes on this just to sort of ask you about that. Lots of endeavour from Todd Cantwell so far this season. There's you can't sort of label the attitude that, has sort of been an issue in the past. He's had other managers come out and say that his attitude's not always been there. I think this season it probably has been. He looks like he's really sort of willing to knuckle down and try and, get himself back in that squad and playing well. But ultimately, when you look at his stats, no goals, no assists so far this season. There was that really nice ball he played over for Sargent for Dowell's goal against Coventry. But aside from that, not really looking like the sort of creator that he has been in other times in the Championship. I mean, that season, last time out where they won the title, I thought he was probably one of the underrated players in that squad. Buendia is the man that's always going to, get the sort of headline. He's the creator, he's the goal scorer. But Cantwell still chipped in with a lot of goals that season, lots of assists. And even when Buendia wasn't in that squad, you sort of felt that he could, almost do a similar job in sort of terms of creation. So what have you made of him, Sam? And what does he need to do to recapture that form that we've seen him, provide in the Premier League and the Championship in previous seasons?
I think he probably needs to be in and around the box a little bit more. We're seeing too much of him coming deep to try and get on the ball in the halfway line. And I think that's probably a product of confidence. He probably wants to show that he can be back to the player that he was. And if you're not getting the service, you can totally understand the move to try and get on the ball more. And if you want to be more involved, that seems like the logical choice. But you look back at that 2019-20 season, which was undoubtedly the best season of his career, and most of where we saw him popping up was on the edge of the box, inside the box, really towards the back end of attacks rather than starting them off, which is what he appears to be trying to do this season. I'm not sure that's really his forte, to be honest. I think Buendia was more of a player who could make things happen himself. I think Cantwell is a very good technical player and creative player, but I don't see him necessarily producing anything on his own. I think he needs to be part of a team where he's part of the attacking solution. I think probably maintaining that position a little bit higher up the pitch and being in and around the box to finish, because we know he's got a good finish in him. His instinct is very good, and you see that technical ability almost forced out when he doesn't have much of a choice. But getting on the ball deeper in the pitch, I think he rarely has that sort of killer pass from deep. And, that's no criticism. There aren't many players out there that have that ability. And that's why Buendia was worth, £35 million. And that's why Aston Villa bought him for so much. But I'd like to see Cantwell probably in and around goals a little bit more. As you sort of highlighted, he hasn't got a goal or assist yet, when the likes of Nunez have. Ramsey's already got 3 assists. Sargent, obviously 6 goals and 1 assist. And all the other players, Sinani as well, he's not even getting in the team at the moment, has 2 goals and 3 assists, I think. When all the players that he's competing with are producing those numbers, it's difficult to justify his selection. So I think we need to see him in and around the back end of attacks more than at the start of them. And from there, I think we'll see the prime Todd Cantwell that we perhaps saw in 2019, 2020.
West Brom, the visitors tomorrow afternoon to Carrow Road. They've had a bit of a difficult start to the season, right? He's on YouTube has put, watch the end of the West Brom game Wednesday night. It was toxic. Get the first goal, and even better, another travelling support will turn on Steve Bruce. And they've also conceded first in the last 7 of their last 9 games. So we know that Norwich, Smith was asked about it this morning, that they've scored against every single opponent so far this season. So that's, bodes well in terms of Carrow Road, that is. So that bodes well in that regard to the end of that point that Wrighty's made there. But 20th in the league, Sam, 2 defeats, one win, only 1 win all so far this season, and 6 draws. So they seem like they're the draw specialists. So what have you made of them from afar, and what do you sort of make of Steve Bruce's future at West Brom? I think particularly if Norwich can go and beat them tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I think they've been unlucky, to be honest, and I feel a little bit for Steve Bruce, because West Brom have the highest XG for and the lowest XG against in the Championship, and they're currently 20th in the league. And that's just a problem with finishing chances and making individual errors, really, or maybe the goalkeeper having struggles. And the fact that they've got 6 draws, they've only lost 2 games. Dean Smith highlighted this morning that they've lost as many games to Norwich. So I feel like maybe they have been better than the league table suggests, and the amount of points they've got suggests. But at the end of the day, football is a results business, and if Bruce can't produce something pretty soon, he's going to be out of a job. I feel for him having to travel to Carrow Road against, no doubt, the form team in the Championship, and probably the favourites for promotion, and he has to get a result to save his job. I think to judge him on tomorrow would be harsh, but I absolutely wouldn't put it past the football industry to do that, and I wouldn't put it past him to be out of a job if they do lose to Norwich. So the pressure's absolutely on, but West Brom is certainly a better team than anybody just looking at the league table 1 to 24 might believe. I think they will be comfortably top half and probably in and around the playoffs when you look at not only their underlying numbers for the start of the season, but the squad they've got. Plenty of not only championship operators, but very talented players. I think Jed Wallace, for example, fits into both of those categories. And they have threatened at times in those sort of playoff positions. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a rollover by any stretch for Norwich. And we've seen how variable the championship can be. They looked, they got past Bristol playing pretty poorly and they were fourth in the championship. And they lost to Cardiff in probably their worst performance of the season. And nobody's expecting Cardiff to be in and around it. So you know how unpredictable the championship can be. And once you look a little bit deeper at West Brom, I do feel for them a little bit because they probably have deserved to get some better results than they have. But at the end of the day, Norwich are becoming almost result specialists, where before they were probably better at performances under Daniel Farker. When they were losing, it felt like the performances were there, but they didn't have the nous or the cleverness to win games. Whereas now it's the opposite, and that's not what a team who's performing well and doesn't have that ability to win wants to play against. They want to play against a team who probably is just as nice as them and hasn't been able to get things over the line. I think it's going to be a really difficult assignment for West Brom, but probably more of a difficult assignment for Norwich than a lot of people may think. So they'll need to be wary, as you always do in the Championship, but even more so than they have in the recent home games against, obviously, Bristol and Coventry, I think.
Lots of comments coming in, keep them coming in, and we'll get round to those in just a moment. But before we go into those, Sam, I just want to pick up actually on that point about performances. We kind of spoke about it at the start of the show in regards to the Bristol City performance. There's a lot of fans obviously still referencing Daniel Farker and the beautiful football that we got to see in the Championship. Dean Smith's approach, very different, much more pragmatic. It seems like Norwich are able to grind out results when they're not playing very well, which is always a benchmark usually for a very good side. But I can understand the frustrations of fans. I think 9 games into the season now, and you can say there hasn't really been a full 90-minute performance from Norwich. And is that a bit of a concern? And what maybe do you feel like they need to do? I mean, we know that Hayden, Yanulis, those kind of characters are all coming back into this squad very soon. So is that maybe the sort of key that might unlock that sort of performance door?
I think both Hayden and Yanulis will have an enormous impact, having both the balance of Yanulis on the left and the actual defensive midfielder that they've required for probably nearly a year and a half now. I think that will add to them a great deal. But also, this is a team where a lot of the key players are getting used to playing with a lot of the other players. Todd Cantwell, let's not forget, barely played for Norwich last season. Denelson Arnie, another person who's been key at points this season, has barely played for Norwich before. Marcelino Nunez, probably the most constant player on the team sheet at the moment, is also a new signing. So you look at that and they're probably a team that's still gelling. We said at the start of the season that they would probably need to do that, especially under a coach who, for the first time, is leading sort of his own team and a team that he's done a bit of recruitment on. So there's still an element of gelling, I think, but also the tactical elements that we spoke about, and having Kenny McLean as a defensive midfielder, that's not ideal. Having Sam Byram out on the left, and I know he's done well there before, and he's a very solid operator, reliable operator. And for that reason, I think a lot of people are happy to have him there. But there's a reason why left footers have played at left back for pretty much the history of football, and it is advantageous. So I think there are various elements that will come together that will make Norwich a better side. You generally see, actually, as the season goes on, that teams will become almost bad teams get worse and good teams get better. So I do expect us to see Norwich at a much higher level, in 10 or 15 games than they are now. But it's not the start of the season anymore. I think the 10-game mark is where a lot of people say, you can start looking at the table and that's where you can start judging things. It'll be 10 games after that West Brom game. So there's not exactly the excuse of it's the start of the season. I still think we'll see Norwich get better with time. But before long, we're going to have to stop saying those sorts of things and we're going to have to start evaluating this Norwich team for exactly what it is. So we need to see those signs soon. But obviously, as you said, there are the caveats of Hayden, the left-back injury crisis. And I think Norwich will definitely improve once they've sorted those issues.
Yeah, delving into the comments, one of the issues that Will Granty has seen this season, he thinks that the midfield's been quite loose on the ball. Do you think it's because of a young, experienced midfield in the likes of Nunes, Gibbs and Ramsey? I mean, we kind of spoke about the caveat there of Hayden. I think the fact they've had, him not available, Jakob Sorensen not available, although I'd say Hayden's probably more the sort of natural athletic defensive midfielder that maybe Norwich need more than what Jakob Sorensen is. So what would you say to that, Sam? Do you feel that Norwich have been loose on the ball, and is it down to an experience?
I think with Nunes, that's part of his character. He obviously wants to take risks, and he's very comfortable on the ball and very confident. And you get the sense that he just loves being on the ball, and that's to his detriment and an advantage. We saw obviously how it can be a negative when he virtually gave away that goal to Bristol on Wednesday night. But you've also seen him sort of with the freedom and the confidence just whack that free kick into the top corner against Hull. And I don't think you get one without the other. So as much as you probably want to see that ratio improve, and I actually think we saw that with Emi Buendia, and that was probably a part of his development, was having that realisation that as much as it's brilliant to play a delicious through ball, you can't lose a ball on the edge of your box 20 times. To do that, it's not that ratio isn't sustainable. So I think we probably need to see Nunes improve on that. It's worth noting that he is 22, and as Will said, the inexperience is probably an element there. He's not played in a league with anywhere near as much pressure as there is in the Championship. The amount of eyes on these games are, it's probably more than 10 times the number of people watching his games in Chile, or at least seeing the key moments of those. So yeah, I think for Nunes, probably it is. Trying to think of the other names. Gibbs, I think, actually is quite solid on the ball. I wouldn't say that he was part of the looseness, perhaps. And Ramsey perhaps does give the ball away a little bit, but not a high amount for somebody in that position when you're higher up the pitch. And I think this is probably why Nunes will, especially if Norwich get promoted, end up playing in a sort of number 10 role, because once you're higher up the pitch, you can afford to take those risks, because if you lose a ball, it's probably still 2 lines of defence before the opposition is in on goal. But this is why I sometimes struggle to see Nunes as a 6 or an 8, because I think he wants to take those risks and he's not in the right area of the pitch to be able to do that. So as much as Ramsey perhaps is or would be seen as loose, I think you're allowed to be slightly more loose in that position. So I wouldn't see Ramsey or Gibbs as part of that problem. I absolutely do see it with Nunes, and it's something that does frustrate me a little bit, and I think it's something that he'll have to iron out of his game if he's to achieve a higher level than Norwich City. But no, I do think that inexperience is an issue, and it's probably something that is going to get better with time.
Staying on the theme of midfielders, Johannes on Facebook has said, I haven't been able to see much of Sarah so far this season. What are your thoughts on him? Me and you kind of spoke a little bit at length the other day on the Bristol City preview about Sarah. You felt that he might have got his opportunity the other night in the starting 11. Turned out he didn't. So Smith still very much, complimentary and praising him very highly in his press conferences. So what have you made of him so far this season, Sam? It's a very small sample, so very difficult to give a full judgment, but did get that assist the other night from the corner.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stop predicting that he's going to start, because I keep doing that and he doesn't. So I do wonder what's sort of holding Dean Smith back from unleashing him, especially given, as we discussed earlier, Cantwell has been, full of endeavour and hard work, but not exactly forcing himself into the team. So I am surprised that he hasn't started yet. I don't really know what the reasoning behind that would be. I think any claim that he's still easing him back from injury would probably be, this would be slightly excessive. So I don't know really what's going on there. It doesn't look like any sort of untoward situation or any attitude problem or anything like that yet. But yeah, I don't know. I think we probably see Sarah in the starting 11 soon. But every time I say this is the time that he's going to start, he doesn't end up doing it. So yeah, I'm interested to know. I think perhaps the fact that Norwich will face, away from home, maybe Sarah will be preferred more in those games. Smith actually made that distinction in his press conference this morning between the tactics at home and the tactics away. He said he wants to be in possession more at home and he'll counter away from home. And I wonder if that recognition means that Sarah is more likely to come into the team when Norwich want to be a little bit more solid at those sorts of away grounds. So maybe Blackpool on the 1st of October, we see him start for the first time, although now that I've said that, he probably goes and starts tomorrow, doesn't he? So any Gabriel Sarah fans can can thank me for making that prediction. But yeah, I am interested to see how he can do with a larger sample size, because as you said, I've been really impressed with what I've seen. Technically, he looks like a fantastic player, and in the cameos that he's made, you feel a bit sorry because he's coming on quite late, usually in a winning team, and he's having to do a lot of booting the ball away and sitting solidly on the edge of the box, and that's not really his game. But I think he's now fully match fit, and I'm hoping to see him soon, because he does look like a player that can really add a lot of quality to Norwich, especially at this level.
Yeah, Cleveland Bennett on Facebook saying, aren't the Baggies one of the bogey teams for Norwich? I just looked at the form, actually. 2 wins, 2 defeats and 1 draw in their last 5 meetings. The overall record, Norwich have won 21, 16 draws and 27 defeats. So fairly level, those two teams, I'd say. Yeah, just bringing up a few other comments. Righty thinking it could be potential Norwich manager Hoodoo to strike again, especially with the international break coming up. Time to potentially rethink and shake up. So yeah, Steve Bruce, we know, is a little bit under pressure. I sort of looked on Twitter earlier, and a lot of West Brom fans feel that if they lose tomorrow, it maybe is time for a change. Just bringing up a few others. Team news wise, Joseph's asking, yeah, we kind of just brought it to you at the start of the show, but Grant Hanley potentially one that's out. Other than that, no real changes from squad the other day. Unulis is looking like he's making good progress. No time frame on that one, and Hayden potentially also back in training at the start of next week. So very, very positive on that one. Sam, to round off the show, it's that time of the show that we all love, the score prediction time. I'm going to put it out there. I absolutely nailed the prediction the other night. I mean, we were sat there next to each other in the press box, and when the first sort of couple of goals went in, you said, nah, it's not going to happen. It can't happen, can it? Loads of goals, and by the time it reached 3-1, I said, you wait and see. And the late goal I predicted for Bristol City came in, and they scraped the 3-2 win. So what do you see this one? How do you see this one going, Sam? Norwich looking to try and register their 7th successive win.
Yeah, I mean, people should just ignore me and just skip to yours, because that's the spoiler. That's the spoiler. Is Adam Harvey's predictions are what's going to happen. I think you've got a few right in a row now, but if I have to go for one, I actually see Norwich, and I know I'm bringing doom and gloom where it's probably not necessary, but I actually see a 1-1. I think West Brom are looking like a decent team, and Steve Bruce will have his team right up for it, because his job possibly depends on it. So I don't see Norwich getting beaten, especially not at home, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's a 1-1 and West Brom manage to get a point away from Norwich for the first time in 7 championship games. What about you? Here we go. Yeah. Here's where we find out.
You know what? You've actually stole my thunder. I actually said 1-1 to a few mates I met yesterday. I just feel as if that sort of run of 6 straight wins has got to come to an end at some point. I don't think Norwich will lose the game tomorrow, but West Brom, the draw specialists in the league, as you sort of said, Steve Bruce very much under pressure. And to be honest, at the start of the week, I said if Norwich get 4 points from these 2 home games, then I'd be very, very pleased. So, obviously I want that to be 6 points. Of course I do, but I think 1-1 as well. I can see West Brom striking early, and I think Norwich will come back in the game to at least maintain that unbeaten run and extend that, albeit that it won't make it 7 successive wins. But yeah, a little bit negative from us too at the end of the show there. But lots of really good comments. A few 3-1 there from Twitchy Terry. I think I've seen 4-0 in there a few times. Yeah, so a lot of positivity amongst the fan base. So yeah, that's probably a good indicator. 2-1 there. Ivan Easter saying on Facebook as well. So yeah, that will round off the show. Someone saying, please mention Pookie. Go back if you missed the start of the show, then we done a bit of a segment on Pookie, so that's a one to go back and watch. We've got really lots of great content across our channels at the moment. Dean Smith's press conference video from this morning is up, so you can go and check out all the latest team news on there and everything else he had to say ahead of this one. Sam's Tactics Board video, that will be available later on this afternoon as well, so that's well worth a watch if you're a Pink and Plus subscriber. Obviously a free trial, $1.99 a month thereafter if you're not on that, and obviously got all the usual articles on there as well. Chris Sutton's column, we have Ewan Roberts' column, Chris Gorham's column, so lots of really good expert opinion there. We will all be at Carrow Road tomorrow for this one, so really looking forward to the game. Hopefully Norwich can register their 7th successive victory, and me and you can be proved wrong with our score predictions, but as Sam said, I've got a bit of a knack with it, so hopefully that will come to an end and I'm proved wrong. So thanks for joining us this lunchtime. As I said, check it out across the Pink and the Pink and Plus app. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and hopefully the weather will be a little bit nicer. I got pretty wet getting out of the car when I got home from Colney, so yeah, fingers crossed the weather can improve, and it's 3 points for Norwich City tomorrow afternoon.